The shimmering lights of the Copa room at the Sands Hotel glittered, reflecting off the polished glasses and sequined dresses. Dean Martin, cool as ever in his tailored tuxedo, leaned into the microphone, a perfectly timed pause hanging in the air. The crowd was eating it up, a low hum of anticipation filling the opulent room. He delivered the punchline, a smooth, effortless jab that landed perfectly. Laughter erupted, a wave of delighted applause washing over the stage. Dean smiled, a genuine, easy smile that promised more good times. Then it happened. From a prime table, close enough to the stage that every word cut through the applause, a voice boomed, thick with a Brooklyn accent. "Hey, Dino, what's with the WAP jokes? You forgetting where you came from?" It was the boss, a man whose presence was usually felt more than heard, his power a quiet hum beneath the city's glitz. Now he was loud, clear, and aiming straight at Dean Martin. The words "WAP jokes" hung in the air, a raw, demeaning insult about Dean's Italian heritage, delivered for everyone to hear. The laughter died, the applause choked off, the clinking of glasses stopped. A sudden, heavy silence descended on the room, thick enough to cut with a knife. Every eye, from the cocktail waitresses to the high rollers, was glued to the stage, then flicked to the boss's table. Dean Martin, caught mid-smile, didn't flinch. His eyes, usually dancing with mischief, held a steady, unreadable gaze. He paused for a beat, maybe two, the silence stretching. Then a slight, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. He simply nodded, a slow, deliberate movement, acknowledging the interruption, the insult, without breaking character, without a single word in return. It was a silent acknowledgement that spoke volumes. The audience held its breath, sensing the sudden, sharp shift in the room's energy. This wasn't part of the show. The boss's table, moments before a center of boisterous celebration, fell utterly silent. The usual entourage, men with sharp suits and sharper eyes, shifted uneasily in their seats. A few exchanged quick, nervous glances, their faces betraying a flicker of concern. The lively, electric hum of entertainment that had filled the room just moments ago now vibrated with an unspoken tension, a nervous energy that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Some slights echo louder than any applause. The boss, for the first time in a long time, looked genuinely taken aback. Dean Martin's non-reaction, his quiet dignity, seemed to throw him off balance. He pushed back his heavy chair, the scrape against the polished floor, a shockingly loud sound in the sudden quiet. He stood up, a hulking shadow against the backdrop of the stage lights. His gaze was fixed on Dean, a mixture of surprise and something darker in his eyes. The entire room wondered what would happen next. Would he storm the stage? Would Dean finally respond? Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. That abrupt silence, that scraping chair, didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was a ripple on the surface of a deep, complicated pool that was 1950s and 60s Las Vegas. This wasn't just a city, it was a universe built on dreams, risk, and a very specific kind of understanding. Neon signs burned brighter here, music played louder, and fortunes were made and lost faster than anywhere else. It was a place where glamour and grime lived side by side, where the biggest stars rubbed shoulders with the most powerful figures, and where the rules of the outside world often didn't apply. Everything moved on a handshake and a nod, especially when it came to the entertainment. Dean Martin fit into this world like he was born for it. He came from humble beginnings, a kid from Steubenville, Ohio, who learned to sing as a way to make a living. But he had something special, an effortless charm, a voice that could melt ice, and a way of making everyone around him feel at ease. He was a natural, never trying too hard, always cool. In a town full of people putting on an act, Dean was just Dean. He was known for his integrity, his loyalty to his friends, and his quiet professionalism. These weren't just good traits. In Las Vegas, they were essential for survival. The city itself was a delicate ecosystem. The entertainers brought the crowds, the casino owners provided the venues, and then there were the influential figures. These were the men everyone knew about, but few spoke of openly. They ran things from the shadows, their power woven into the very fabric of the Strip. They owned pieces of the casinos, controlled unions, and made sure things ran smoothly, or else. Their presence was a fact of life. You respected them, you feared them, and you certainly didn't challenge them in public. It was an unspoken agreement. They had their world, the performers had theirs, and as long as everyone stayed in their lane, the money kept flowing. The boss was one of these men, a prominent player in this intricate dance. His table was always the best in the house, his requests always met, his word, usually law. He and his crew were a regular fixture at the shows, a constant reminder of the unseen hand that guided so much of the city. Dean Martin, like all the big names, understood this dynamic. He'd seen the boss's entourage overstep boundaries before, backstage, in the casino, pushing a little too far. They'd try to get extra favors, skip lines, or demand special treatment. Dean would usually handle it with a quiet word to a manager or a knowing glance that said, "Let it go, it's not worth the trouble." He was a master of diplomacy, diffusing situations without ever making a scene, without ever giving anyone a reason to escalate. He knew the game, and he played it expertly, always maintaining his dignity and the respect of those around him. But that night something had changed. The boss had crossed a line, a very public line, and in doing so, he had challenged not just Dean, but the very unspoken rules that held Las Vegas together. The quiet diplomacy Dean Martin was known for had been tested many times before that night. The boss, over the years, had slowly chipped away at the unspoken rules, his arrogance growing with each unchallenged slight. It wasn't a sudden break. It was a slow, grinding erosion of respect that had been building for months, even years. Each incident, minor on its own, added another layer to the tension that finally snapped on stage. There were the times the boss would saunter into the showroom 20 minutes late, right in the middle of Dean's opening number. Not quietly, mind you, but with a whole entourage, making a show of finding their table, clinking glasses, and talking loudly, completely disrupting the flow of the performance. Dean would just pause, give a little shrug, and then pick up where he left off. A professional to the core, but everyone in the room, especially the other performers, knew what it meant. It was a deliberate act, a way for the boss to show he was above the rules, even the rules of the stage. Then there were the late-night phone calls. During the show, while Dean was in the middle of a ballad, the boss would pull out a phone, a big, clunky thing back then, and start barking orders into it, his voice carrying over the music. It was disrespectful, a clear signal that the entertainment was secondary to his business. Dean would sometimes glance over, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, but he never stopped singing. He just kept that smooth, easy smile on his face, as if nothing in the world could bother him. Backstage, things were even more direct. The boss would send word, often through one of his muscle-bound associates, demanding Dean come to his table after the show or insisting on a private performance in his suite. These weren't requests, they were demands. Dean's manager would usually handle it, politely declining with an excuse about Dean being tired or having another engagement. But the constant pressure, the expectation that Dean was simply there to serve the boss's whims, was a steady drip of disrespect. Promises, too, became unreliable. The boss had a way of making commitments about club bookings or security arrangements that would later fall through, leaving Dean's team scrambling to fix things. He'd promise a bigger cut for a special event, only for the numbers to mysteriously shrink when the checks came around. It was never enough to start a war, but it was enough to make everyone involved feel used, and to show that the boss's word meant less and less. Dean, ever the peacekeeper, would often just sigh and tell his manager to just make it work, absorbing the cost and the insult himself rather than creating a scene. His growing disregard wasn't just aimed at Dean. There were stories, whispers really, about how the boss treated casino staff, the showgirls, even other patrons. A cocktail waitress getting an inappropriate comment, a dealer being shortchanged and then threatened, a minor celebrity being publicly humiliated for an imagined slight. These incidents rarely made it to the papers, but they circulated through the city's underground network, painting a picture of a man whose sense of entitlement was growing out of control. Performers like Dean would see it, would feel the tension in the room, but they couldn't intervene. It was a dangerous game. They were there to entertain, to keep the illusion alive, even as the reality of the boss's escalating behavior became harder to ignore. All these moments, these small, discreet humiliations, built up. They weren't isolated incidents. They were a consistent pattern, a slow, corrosive build-up of disrespect. The insult on stage that night wasn't a random act. It was the culmination of years of thinly veiled contempt, a growing sense of impunity from the boss, who had come to believe that no one, not even Dean Martin, would ever challenge him. He'd pushed, and Dean, for the sake of peace and the complex ecosystem of Las Vegas, had always absorbed it. But that night, the boss had pushed just a little too far. The atmosphere in Las Vegas, already a place of heightened stakes and veiled intentions, grew increasingly tense. The boss's behavior, once subtly aggressive, now felt more overt, more challenging. It was like a slowly tightening knot, squeezing the air out of the room when he was around. Backstage, the conversations among performers and casino executives shifted. They weren't about new acts or show tunes anymore. They were filled with apprehension, quiet strategizing about how to handle the boss's escalating provocations without inciting open conflict. Whispers replaced open discussion, and glances spoke volumes. Everyone knew the line was getting thinner. There were unspoken pressures, a heavy weight on entertainers like Dean. They had to maintain peace, protect their careers, and navigate the dangerous waters of organized crime's influence. Many knew the stories, the hushed rumors of other performers who had disappeared from the circuit, or seen their careers mysteriously falter after crossing the wrong person. It wasn't just about their own livelihoods. It was about protecting their families, their crews, and the very fabric of the city's entertainment industry. The cost of a misstep could be immense, and everyone felt it. During performances where the boss was present, the tension was a palpable thing. Audience members, who were often regulars and understood the city's undercurrents, cast cautious glances. There were strained smiles from the staff, and a palpable tension hung in the air as everyone silently judged the unfolding power dynamics. You could see people leaning forward slightly, not just for the show, but for the unspoken drama playing out between the stage and that prime table. The clinking of glasses seemed to pause, and even the jazz music seemed to hold its breath for a beat too long. Dean Martin, usually the picture of effortless cool, felt the immense weight of the situation. His internal struggle was real. He had to maintain composure, uphold his dignity, and keep the show going, all while feeling this immense pressure building up inside him. His usual carefree demeanor was subtly strained. The easy smile was still there, but perhaps a little tighter, a little less spontaneous. His eyes, though still sparkling with stage charm, held a hint of weariness. He was reaching his emotional brink, a point where even his legendary patience and good humor were being tested to their limits. He loved performing, loved the energy of the crowd, but these nights, with the boss in the room, were draining him. The city itself seemed to reflect this shift. The neon glow of the strip, usually so inviting and vibrant, felt less like a beacon of fun and more like a harsh spotlight, exposing the raw nerves of the city. The clinking of glasses, once a celebratory sound, now seemed more brittle, like thin ice about to crack. The jazz music, usually smooth and uplifting, carried an undercurrent of sorrow, a melancholic hum that resonated with the pervasive psychological burden everyone felt. Even the smoke-filled air, a staple of every casino showroom, felt heavier, thicker, as if it was trapping the unspoken anxieties within its hazy confines. Every element of the environment, from the lights to the sounds, seemed to reinforce the growing unease, mirroring the internal turmoil of Dean Martin and everyone around him. The stage was set, not just for entertainment, but for a confrontation that had been brewing for far too long. The insult hung in the air, a rude interruption to the smooth rhythm of the night. Dean Martin, however, barely missed a beat. His smile, though a fraction less genuine, remained pinned in place. He finished his current song, the last notes fading into a silence that felt heavier than usual. He didn't look at the boss, not once. Instead, he turned his attention to the rest of the audience, his gaze sweeping over the tables. A silent acknowledgement of their shared experience. He offered a quick, charming line about the perils of late-night revelry, a nod to the fact that everyone heard what happened, but without giving it more power than it deserved. It was a subtle move, a quiet defiance that spoke volumes. He then eased into his next number, a classic ballad, but there was a subtle change in his delivery. His voice, always rich and warm, seemed to carry an extra layer of emotion, a quiet determination. He moved across the stage with his usual grace, but his eyes, though still engaging the crowd, carefully avoided the boss's table. It was a deliberate choice, a boundary drawn without a single word. His jokes, usually light-hearted and spontaneous, now seemed to have an edge, a sharper wit that, while never directly aimed at the boss, highlighted the contrast between genuine entertainment and crude disruption. He wasn't insulting the boss, but he was performing in a way that made the boss's earlier outburst seem even more out of place, more boorish. Dean Martin was doing more than just singing. He was making a statement through his art. He was subtly but effectively highlighting the difference between the genuine artistry and camaraderie that flowed on stage and the crude, disruptive presence at that prime table. He didn't need to speak ill of the boss. His performance became a silent testament to dignity and respect. Every smooth note, every perfectly timed joke, every warm glance at the audience was a quiet assertion of his own worth, a gentle pushback against the disrespect he had just endured. He was showing them what true class looked like, and it wasn't sitting at the boss's table. The audience, initially tense and unsure, slowly began to relax. They saw what Dean was doing, they understood. Their initial discomfort gave way to a growing sense of admiration. Their applause, which had been polite after the insult, began to grow louder, more insistent, more genuine with each song. Their laughter, at first hesitant, became hearty and uninhibited. They were creating an invisible wall of public support around the performer, a collective affirmation that isolated the boss more effectively than any bouncer ever could. The energy in the room shifted. It was no longer about fear or intimidation. It was about shared appreciation for a man who held his ground with grace. Even the boss's associates, who had initially shifted uncomfortably, seemed to pick up on the change. They exchanged glances that were less uneasy and more understanding. They recognized the power of the crowd, the unspoken verdict being delivered, the collective reaction of the audience, the silent affirmation of the other Rat Pack members on stage, and the subtle discomfort of the boss's own associates created an unexpected opportunity. It was a chance for a non-violent resolution, not through force, but through moral authority and shared social values. The power dynamic was shifting, not with a bang, but with a quiet, dignified hum. Dean Martin had turned a moment of public humiliation into a display of quiet strength, and the room was entirely on his side. The very air in the showroom seemed to lighten as Dean Martin finished his set. The applause was thunderous, a genuine outpouring of admiration and relief. It wasn't just for the performance, it was for the quiet strength he had shown. As the final notes faded, Dean took his bow, a subtle, almost imperceptible nod towards the now empty prime table where the boss had been. The boss, visibly unaccustomed to such a public yet unspoken rebuke, had left during Dean's last song. His chair scrape had been quieter this time, almost apologetic, swallowed by the rising tide of applause. His entourage followed, a hurried, almost embarrassed procession out of the showroom. Their usual swagger was gone, replaced by a quick, almost furtive exit that didn't go unnoticed by anyone. Backstage, the atmosphere was different from usual. Other performers, casino staff, and even some prominent guests who had slipped away from their tables for a moment gathered. They didn't speak loudly, but their eyes spoke volumes. Frank Sinatra simply clapped Dean on the shoulder, a firm, approving squeeze that conveyed everything without words. Sammy Davis Jr. offered a wide, relieved grin. Casino executives, usually stoic, offered quiet words of support, their relief palpable. One of the pit bosses, a man who rarely showed emotion, just nodded slowly at Dean, a look of deep understanding in his eyes. It was a silent acknowledgement of the tightrope Dean had walked and the respect he had earned. The boss's reputation, once built on fear and unquestioned authority, suffered a significant blow that night. The story, whispered through the city's hidden networks, was that he had overstepped. He had challenged a king on his own stage, and the king had won, not with a fist, but with dignity. Insiders noted that his influence within the entertainment venues began to wane. He was no longer seen as the ultimate power, but as someone who had tried to push too far and been quietly, yet decisively, put in his place by a performer's moral courage. His presence became less frequent, and when he did appear, it was with a subdued air. The prime tables remained, but the aura of invincibility around him had cracked. Dean Martin's victory was not a triumph of aggression, but a testament to dignity, respect, and the quiet power of moral integrity. His standing in Las Vegas, already legendary, became even more revered. He became a symbol of how one could navigate the complex world of the city without compromising one's values. He showed that true strength wasn't always found in shouting or violence, but in unwavering composure, quiet defiance, and the ability to command respect through character. That night, under the shimmering lights of the Las Vegas stage, Dean Martin didn't just perform, he delivered a masterclass in quiet power. He reminded everyone that some battles are won not with fists or loud words, but with a gaze, a smile, and the silent understanding of an entire room. It was a moment that echoed far beyond the final curtain call, a powerful reflection on the enduring legacy of a man who knew the true meaning of grace under pressure. His calm resolve, his unyielding commitment to his craft and his own self-worth etched that night into the annals of Las Vegas history. It was a reminder that sometimes the most impactful defiance is the one that never raises its voice.